Better?
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. All right, so we are coming to the end of our series on faith and mental health. So hopefully you guys have been enjoying it thus far. And if you guys have and you're itching for a little more, just a shameless plug, we will be having a mental health workshop starting next week. It'll be 3 weeks, so April 5th, April 12th, and April 19th, where we'll be kind of going over a bit more practical applications to how we can integrate mental health and different interventions into our lives. So that will be right after the service at 1 p.m. here in Chicago. It'll be myself and Bill Puga, who is from the suburbs location. He's a psychiatrist extraordinaire, so it'll be good to have him here, sharing his wisdom as well. So definitely, if you are interested in learning more about mental health, please, please, please come through starting next week. So back to our regular scheduled program. So today, our verse that we'll be kind of studying is found in Lamentations chapter 3, verses 22 and 23. Now, I had quite a bit of trouble preparing this sermon because I was reading this text over and over and over again, and for some reason it just was not clicking for me. And it wasn't until I really had to dig into the original language and read different versions that it was starting to kind of come together more and more for me. And hopefully it'll kind of make more sense as we read through different versions ourselves. So I want us to actually read this verse in a few different versions. So I need a few volunteers who are willing to read nice and loud for us. So I have the NIV here, so I'll be reading from the NIV. But if you have someone else who can maybe read from the King James or New King James, someone can volunteer for that one. Okay. And if you have your mobile apps, you can change the version on your mobile app as well. So someone can kind of read the New King James or King James. Someone else can read the ESV. Okay, so Dan, you got the New King James? Okay. Someone else can read the ESV, the English Standard Version. Okay, Kim, thank you. Someone else can read the NASB. Okay, thank you, Aaron. Someone else can read the ASV, American Standard Version.
I got it.
Okay, thank you, Jerlene. And someone else can get the NLT, New Living Translation. Okay, thank you. Okay, so yeah, Lamentations 3, verse 20, 22 and 23. And I'll be reading from the NIV, the New International New International Version. Once I get there, Okay. So it says, because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. So, Dan, go ahead.
Through the Lord's mercies, we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness.
Okay. Thank you. Aaron?
The Lord's loving kindnesses indeed never cease, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness.
Go ahead, Julie.
It is of Jehovah's loving kindness that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness.
Okay. Kim?
The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness.
Okay. Go ahead.
The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning.
Okay. So when we hear these different versions, what stands out to you as a difference between the different versions here?
Different words for faithfulness.
Okay. Yeah, different words for faithfulness, right?
Some versions start with because.
Mm-hmm.
Different words for compassion and mercy. They're
Right.
interchanged in the different versions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so compassion, love, mercy, all those seem to be interchangeable, it seems.
most versions say the Lord's loving kindness is the reason that we are not consumed.
Mm-hmm.
But then in the NASB, it just says the Lord's loving kindness indeed never ceases.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was one of the big differences that I picked up on, was that in some versions it says that because of the great love of our Lord, we are not consumed. And in other verses it says the love of the Lord never ends or never ceases. Right? And so I was curious because I was like, okay, well, why is it that some verses kind of have it different? And so I wanted to look up what does the word consumed mean in the original language? And also, when it says that it never fails, what does that mean in the original language? And what I found was actually quite interesting. So when we actually look at the two different words that are being used here, right, they both actually mean the same thing, right? Tanam, which is the consumed, and kala, which is the one that says never fails, they both mean the same thing: to complete, to finish, to accomplish, to consume, or to perfect. And so kind of going back to the verse again and trying to apply this, I was like, okay, well, because at first I thought when it said we are not consumed, it was referring to like condemnation, right? We're not consumed in the fiery furnace or whatever. But it seems that this meaning has something different. It says to be complete, or to finish, or to accomplish. So what exactly is being completed or accomplished, or in this case, not being consumed or finished? And it makes, at least to me, I think it reads more faithful to the text when that is attributed to the attributes of God, right? So it is the loving kindness of God, the faithfulness of God, the mercy of God, the compassion of God that never ends, that's never complete, that's never consumed, right? Now granted, the idea of we not being consumed makes sense as well, right? Because if God loves us so much and his love never ends and never is consumed, then we also will not be consumed or brought to our end. Because if God's love ever ran out, we would be doomed, right? So there essentially can be two different interpretations, if you will, of this text, at least for verse 22, right? So the first one can be, because of God's love, we are not consumed or ended or condemned, for his mercy never fails. And the second interpretation can be, there is no end to God's love, his mercy never ends, and his compassion never fails or is consumed. So basically, what's being described here is that there is this never-ending or never being exhausted factor of the attributes of God, the characteristics of God, right? You can never exhaust God's mercy or exhaust God's love or completely consume his compassion or consume his faithfulness. It never comes to an end. It is infinite, eternal, everlasting. Have you ever felt like you were so sinful, you did the same things over and over and over and over and over and over again, that there's no way that God can still love me? There's no way that God can still forgive me. There's no way that God can still have mercy upon me. There's no way that God can be compassionate towards me. I have exhausted God's love. I have gone too far. I've been too sinful. But what this verse tells us is that you can't do that. There is no end. There is no exhausting. There is no consuming. You can never be too bad or too sinful to completely exhaust God of the love that he has and the compassion that he has, the mercy that he has, and the grace that he has for you. See, humans, we have a limit, okay? There's only so many times someone can wrong me before I just want to stop forgiving them, right? What is the limit to human forgiveness or human grace? 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 7 times? Right? Peter actually asked Jesus this question. If we go to Matthew 18, verses 21 and 22, we actually see an interaction between Jesus and Peter where he actually asked Jesus this question about how many times should we forgive? Okay, yeah, Matthew 18, verse 21 and 22. I thought I had the, actually, do I have the verse here? Oh, I just have the reference here, okay. Yeah, Matthew 18, verses 21 and 22. It reads, "Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, 'Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times?' Jesus answered and said, 'I tell you, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. So Peter was asking Jesus this question of how many times must I forgive? And he throws out a number, 7 times, right? Now, obviously, many people know that the number 7 holds, meaning in the Bible. What does number 7 typically represent? Completion, right? Yeah. So Peter wasn't just choosing a random number out of nowhere. He was essentially asking, how many times do I have to forgive until it's complete, until I can be done with it, right? When can my forgiveness be consumed? When can it be exhausted? When can it come to completion? And Jesus' response is to say, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. Again, Jesus isn't just choosing random numbers, right? He's also using this number 7. And he's saying 70 times 7. Not to say that, okay, well, let me tally up how many times, okay, 70 times 7 is 490. Okay, once I hit 490, I'm done forgiving people. No, right? What he's saying is there is no completion. There is no end to your forgiveness. You should always have a forgiving and gracious and compassionate heart towards those around you. There is no end. There is no completion. So that is essentially what's being reflected here in Lamentations 3, verse 22. God's love, God's mercy, God's faithfulness, God's compassion is never ending. It's never consumed. And if we are to, love like Christ loved, or to reflect his character, it means that the same should be true for us as well. Now, this might sound a little bit weird, but bear with me. Hopefully it will make sense. So, God is not perfect. Now, typically when we hear the word perfect, we think of like being without flaw, being without sin, right? Which is true. God is perfect in that sense. But biblically speaking, when you see the word perfect, what it often translates to is actually the word completion, or to come to an end. And so when I say that God is not perfect, what I'm saying that there is no completion to him. He is eternal. His attributes, his characteristics, these things are everlasting. There is no end. There is no completion to it. And that is a good thing, right? God's love, God's mercy, God's compassion, God's grace, God's faithfulness is never ending. It's never complete. It never is consumed. And that is a good thing. And we should praise God that he, in this sense, is not perfect. So let's look at some context surrounding Lamentations. So what does the word Lamentations mean? Anyone know what lamentation means? Right, to mourn, right? So to lament means to mourn or to grieve or to cry loudly or to express sadness or sorrow, right? So this entire book is centered around this idea of grief, sorrow, and sadness. And the author of this book, Jeremiah, was known as the weeping prophet, right? Not a very great nickname, but it was because a lot of what he was prophesying was great distress, great afflictions, grief, sorrow against his people, against himself, right? These were not about happy times that he was prophesying of, but it was of times of sorrow and grief. And so this whole book was named Lamentations because of this context surrounding the things that Jeremiah was talking about and experiencing. When was the last time that you had a good cry? The last time that you maybe grieved or mourned or was sad? Yesterday, this morning? Do we think that crying in the morning is a good thing? Mm-hmm.
For everything, there's a season.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so nothing wrong with crying, nothing wrong with mourning. Everything has a reason, everything has a season. But oftentimes, when we maybe see someone who is crying or mourning, at least a lot of things that I typically hear is, oh, don't cry, it's going to be okay, just be strong, right? Now, if someone is crying, and you go up to them and tell them, don't cry, be strong, what message are you communicating to them? You're weak. Right. Right, knock it off, stop that. Why are you doing that? As if they're doing something that's wrong. And so we communicate this message of, you are not allowed to express your emotion in this way, because by doing so, you are weak, and you are not allowed to be weak. What does that do to a person when they aren't allowed to express their emotions? When they feel as if they can't be sad, they can't cry, they can't grieve because I don't want to appear weak in front of people. That stifles them, that suppresses them. They aren't allowed to actually authentically experience their emotions. And obviously, I know that when people say these things, they aren't trying to intentionally be dismissive. They're trying to be consoling. But again, sometimes the message can be interpreted in a different way. And I think that, particularly when it comes, let me talk to the men, how many times have you heard, real men don't cry? Or even worse, stop being emotional, you're acting like a girl. Right? What message are we communicating to men when we tell them that they're not allowed to cry, that they're not allowed to be emotional? How are we raising a generation of men who feel as if I'm emotional, that means I'm emasculating myself? What message are we communicating when we say things like this? And what ends up happening is that the only emotion that apparently men seemingly are able to still express while still hanging on to their man card is anger. And that's why oftentimes the only emotion that we see men express is anger, because that's the only one that's deemed socially acceptable and not emasculating. And so what ends up happening is that all the emotions that men experience are then filtered and expressed through anger. And we actually have a term for this. It's called the anger iceberg. So what we actually see, what people actually present, is the anger. But if you dig a little bit deeper, you actually realize that there's actually a whole host of other emotions that are not being processed, not being dealt with, not being managed, that are being suppressed, and that are simply being filtered through the anger. So, a real man isn't someone who is stoic and emotionless. A man is someone who is able to experience their emotions and express them in a healthy manner. And whoever said that real men don't cry must not have read the Bible, because Jesus wept. When Jesus was going to Lazarus, when he went to go visit him at the grave, he knew that he was about to resurrect him. He knew what was about to happen. But he came and he saw everyone else grieving, everyone else mourning, everyone else in tears. And he took the time to mourn with them. He took the time to grieve with them, and he wept. Jesus, on his way to Jerusalem, when he was about to enter the city, he wept over Jerusalem. He knew what was about to happen. The suffering, the rejection, the betrayal, the ultimate death that he was about to enter into. And he was sorrowful for the city that was once called to be God's people that are now rejecting the very one that came for them. And he wept. Jesus experienced the full range of emotions. And I don't think anyone is saying that Jesus isn't a real man. So stop suppressing your emotions. Stop trying to be strong. Expressing your emotions doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And even if you perceive it to be weak, as we learned a couple weeks back from Pastor John's sermon, there is strength in weakness. For when I am weak, that's when I'm strong, because the power of Christ can dwell within me. So we should not be trying to hide our emotions or suppress our emotions. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you less of a man or less of a person. It makes you a human, a one that is in need of God, just like everyone else. So that's the context of Lamentations, right? It's a book about grieving, sorrow, sadness. The prophet Jeremiah was known as the weeping prophet because he was such inundated by this grief and sorrow that he couldn't help but weep. And weeping, as we see, is not a bad thing. So let's actually go back and read Lamentations 3, verses 1 through 18. I am a man who has seen affliction by the rod of the Lord's wrath. He has driven me away and made me walk in darkness rather than light. Indeed, he has turned his hand against me again and again all day long. He has made my skin and my flesh grow old and has broken my bones. He has besieged me and surrounded me with bitterness and hardship. He has made me dwell in darkness like those long dead. He has walled me in so I can't escape. He has weighed me down with chains. Even when I call out or cry for help, he shuts out my prayer. He has barred my way with blocks of stone. He has made my paths crooked. Like a bear lying in wait, like a lion in hiding, he dragged me from the path and mangled me and left me without help. He drew his bow and made me the target for his arrows. He pierced my heart with the arrows from the quiver. I became the laughingstock of all my people. They mock me in song all day long. He has filled me with bitter herbs and gave me gall to drink. He has broken my teeth with gravel. He has trampled me in the dust. I've been deprived of peace. I have forgotten what prosperity is. So I say, my splendor is gone, and all that I had hoped for from the Lord. So when we read this passage, what are we hearing from Jeremiah here? What are some things that he expressed? Suffering, right? What else? Hopelessness. Mm-hmm.
Seems like he's going against his culture. Everybody against him.
Right, yeah, it seems like he's been abandoned. Everyone's against him now. Yeah. So there's a long laundry list of things that he mentions just in this short passage alone, right? He talks about being abandoned, discarded, being like he's in darkness. He feels like he's been targeted. He's been in pain. He's been suffering. He's been crying. He feels surrounded or trapped He feels there's been a bunch of hardship he's been experiencing. There's bitterness. He feels weighed down. He feels helpless. He feels ignored, directionless, thwarted, hunted, ambushed, torn, broken, forsaken, ashamed, embarrassed, mocked, deprived of peace. He's forgotten what good days are like. He feels powerless and hopeless. Has anyone ever felt any of these before? Hopefully not all of them at once, but at least maybe one or two at one point in your life. What do we do when we feel affliction? How do we respond when we're dealing with affliction?
You know God is with you.
Yes. Remembering that God is with you. So a lot of times, unfortunately, that's the one thing that we forget. And the first question that we tend to ask is, where are you, God? I've been going through all this affliction. I've been going through all this suffering. I've been going through all this pain. Where are you? I thought you'd be with me. I thought you'd never leave me. I thought you'd never forsake me. But I feel alone right now. I feel abandoned right now. Where are you? Have you ever felt like you had nothing left in you, that all your strength was gone, and you ask yourself this question because you're starting to lose your hope in God? Where are you, Lord? I thought that you would be with me, but I feel abandoned. There's a very famous verse that's often quoted. It's in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13. You've probably heard it before, where it says that God will never give you more than you can bear. It says, "No temptation has overtaken you except that is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it." And that word temptation can also be interpreted as trial or testing or persecution or affliction, right? And so it tells us here that when these things happen, that God will never give us more than we can bear. Now, what do you think that means? Does it mean that, I think there's a saying that goes, God gives his greatest fights to his strongest warriors, right? Well, we're so strong that we can handle it on our own. But that's not the case at all, right? It's not that we're so strong and we're so mighty that God gives us these things. Nor does it mean that you will not experience any challenges or afflictions at all. But what it does mean is that when you are going through these trials or afflictions, that you will not be carrying it alone, but that God will be the one carrying it with you. Amen. It goes on to say that he will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but when you are tempted, he will provide a way out so that you can endure it. So God himself will be the one to provide the escape. You don't have to try to figure it out on your own. You don't have to try to figure out by yourself. You don't have to use your own strategic powers to save yourself. But it says that God will be the one to provide you a way out. God will be the one to provide you a way of escape. So you are not to endure these things on your own, but God says that he will be with you and that he will provide the way out. Another verse, Matthew 11, verses 28 and 29, speaks to another similar idea. So it says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." So God wants us to give up our burdens so that we can have rest. And when he says, take up his yoke, we're not in a farming agricultural town, but yokes were typically used when oxen were plowing, right? And you essentially have two oxen side by side, and the yoke will be what connects them together. And they both will be able to then pull the plow or pull the weight together. So when Jesus says, take your yoke upon you, or take my yoke upon you, what he's saying is, I will be connected with you, and we will carry this burden together. We will go through this together. You are not alone. This is not something that you have to figure out by yourself. I will be the one carrying it with you. And because of that, it will be light. Because you're not carrying it alone. You have me that will carry it along with you, and your burden will become lighter. So let's continue looking at Lamentations, because first half we see that Jeremiah is reflecting on all his afflictions, on all the things that he's suffering, all the things that he's going through that's causing him grief, that's causing him pain, that's causing him sorrow. But then the second half, there's a switch, and we kind of see that he begins to remember who God is and remember what he's done in the past, and that begins to shift his perspective on things. So let's continue reading from Lamentations 3, verses 19 to 36. I remember my affliction in my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. I well remember them, and my soul is downcast within me. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him, and to one who seeks him. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for a man to bear the yoke while he is young. Let him sit alone in silence, for the Lord has laid it on him. Let him bury his face in the dust. There may yet be hope. Let him offer his cheek to one who would strike him. Let him be filled with disgrace. For no one is cast off by the Lord forever. Though he brings grief, he shall show compassion. So great is his unfailing love. For he does not willingly bring affliction or grief to anyone, to crush underfoot all prisoners in the land, to deny people of their rights before the Lord, to deprive them of justice. Will not the Lord see such things? So after we see this reflection of Jeremiah speaking to all the different sorrows and afflictions that he's experienced, what's the follow-up to that? What does he reflect on next? Right, yeah. So he does question, okay, is this something that's brought by God? And he answers that question by saying, no, these aren't brought by God, right? So he's reassuring himself of who God is and what he does. What else do we see him doing here? Yeah, so we see that there's this installation of hope that's happening as well. So Jeremiah goes through a laundry list of afflictions, but he also goes through a different laundry list of things that bring him hope. He talks about the loving devotion or loving kindness of God. He talks about the mercies of God, the faithfulness of God. The Lord is my portion. Now, that's not something that we really use today. What does it mean that the Lord is my portion? So when I looked up the original word in the Hebrew, right, my portion means a share or a part, an allotment, or an inheritance. Right? So if the Lord is my portion, it means that he is my inheritance. So what does that mean? Well, in that time, the inheritance was passed down from the father to the son. And the son would inherit everything that the father had. Nothing was withheld from him. the son would inherit everything as he was the rightful heir. So if that's the case, if the Lord is my portion and therefore he is my inheritance and I am his heir, then that means that the one who created it all and owns it all is the one who I'm receiving an inheritance from. What do I have to fear? What do I have to be despair of if I have access to all the things that the Father has access to? If all the things that he has, I can have because I am his heir. Essentially, what this is communicating is that I can have a complete reliance and trust in God for my sustenance, for my security, for my identity, and everything else that I may need, for all that is his is mine. He is my portion, and he is my inheritance. So the Lord is my portion. He reflects on the goodness of God, the patience of the Lord, the salvation of the Lord, the discipline of the Lord. The Lord will not cast off forever. The Lord does not abandon us. He doesn't cast us away. The compassion of God, even when we are grieving, right? We think that sometimes when we're in grief that God's abandoned us. But no, God still is there for us. He still has compassion for us. There's an abundance of love. God does not willingly and purposefully or purposelessly afflict us. Right? Kind of going back to what Josh said, right? Is this coming from God? No, it's not. God does not do these things willingly and purposelessly. And of course, the Lord is just. So all the bad things that are happening, God will in the end take care of it all because he is just. So after Jeremiah reflects on all the afflictions, he goes on to reflect on all the things that brings him hope as well. So I want us to actually go through a few other examples in the scripture where we kind of see this dichotomy of someone who is depressed or someone who is downtrodden or someone who is going through some sorrow, and what the response is after they begin to remember or reflect on God, and how things begin to change for them once they do. So let's look at Psalm 73. Surely God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. But as for me, my feet had almost slipped. I nearly lost my foothold, for I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. There were no struggles. Their bodies were healthy and strong. They were free from common human burdens, and they were not plagued by human ills. Therefore pride is their necklace. They clothe themselves with violence. From their callous hearts comes iniquity. Their evil imaginations have no limits. They scoff and speak with malice. With arrogance they threaten oppression. Their mouths lay claim to heaven, and their tongues take possession of the earth. Therefore the people turn to them and drink up waters in abundance. They say, how could God know? Does the Most High know anything? This is what the wicked are like. Always free of care, they go on amassing wealth. Surely in vain I have kept my heart pure, and I've washed my hands in innocence. All day long I have been afflicted, and every morning brings new punishments. If I had spoken out like that, I would have betrayed your children. When I tried to understand all this, it troubled me deeply, until I entered the sanctuary of God, and then I understood their final destiny. Surely you'll place them on slippery ground. You cast them down to ruin. How suddenly are they destroyed, completely swept away by terrors. They're like a dream when one awakes. When you arise, Lord, you will despise them as fantasies. When my heart was grieved and my spirit embittered, I was senseless and arrogant. I was a brute beast before you. Yet I'm always with you. You hold me by my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, and afterward you will take me into glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And on earth has nothing I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Those who are from you will perish. Those who are far from you will perish. You destroy all who are unfaithful to you. But as for me, it is good to be near God. I have made the sovereign Lord my refuge. I will tell of all your deeds. So we see the psalmist here in the first half reflecting on, oh man, like all these wicked people who are not following God, they're rich, they have everything they need, they lack for nothing, they seem to be living the good life. Meanwhile, I'm the one who's trying to be faithful to God, and I'm the one who's suffering. I'm the one who's going through afflictions. I'm the one who's going through sorrow and grief. Am I doing this all in vain? Why am I doing this if it's in the end going to lead to just more suffering? Maybe it will be better for me to just be like the heathens. At least they're living it up and they're having a prosperous and wealthy life. But then he goes on to say, I remembered the sanctuary, and then I understood better. And in the sanctuary, as we know, that is essentially God's plan of salvation at work. And as he remembers the goodness of God, the justice of God, the faithfulness of God, the love of God, the mercy of God, the compassion of God, his tone shifts. And instead of being almost jealous of the wicked for all the things that they have, he instead begins to say, I have the Lord. The Lord is my portion. The Lord is the one that I desire. Whom have I in heaven but you? And on earth there's nothing I desire besides you. And he goes on to say that it is good to be near God because he will be my refuge. And in the end, I know what my destiny will be. And I will be with him forever. And so this remembering of who God is, this remembering of what he's done, this remembering of his character is what shifts his perspective from that of mourning or grieving or even a sense of annoyance and irritation with his situation to one where he's reflecting on the goodness of God, the love of God, and what he will do that will bring him hope in the end. Let's look at another example. 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 through 18. So this is a story of Elijah. So right before this, he just had a showdown with the prophets of Baal, right? So the tournament was basically, we have two offerings here, and whoever can call upon their God to rain down fire from heaven and burn up this offering, their God is the true God, okay? And so the prophets of Baal, they are crying out to God, to their God. You know, they're singing, they're dancing, they're cutting themselves even. They're doing all these things trying to get Baal's attention. Nothing happens. And then Elijah finally comes along and says, okay, it's my turn now. And he says, matter of fact, bring some water, douse it on the offering. Bring it again, douse it on the offering. Mind you, they're in a drought right now. They don't have much water to begin with. They're in a drought. But he's taking all this water, dousing the offering multiple times to make a statement of, if God can burn this offering even when it's drenched in water, then there is no other God besides our God. And so Elijah douses the offering in water, and he prays to God one time, one prayer, and God rains down fire from heaven and consumes the offering and all the water that was around it. And immediately after this triumphant victory, it seems, we have this passage. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them. Basically, I'm going to kill you, what she's saying. So Elijah was afraid, and he ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. Then he laid down under the bush and fell asleep. So after Elisha experienced this triumphant victory, you would think that he would be like over the moon with faith, over the moon with his trust in the Lord and the power that God has. But yet, all it took was just one threat, and he was off running. So much so that he ran for his life and prayed to God, take it from me. He was having suicidal ideations. What is God's response to Elijah? Let's continue. All at once an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. The angel Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for your journey is too much for you." So he got up, ate, and drank. Strengthened by the food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. So the first thing that God does for Elijah is provide for his needs. He doesn't even touch the suicidal ideation stuff yet. He doesn't even touch the depression stuff yet. He provides for his needs first. Then he goes on, and the word of the Lord came to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He replied, "I've been very zealous for the Lord Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." So what are the things that Elijah is saying here that's causing him his depression? Yeah, he feels like he's alone, right? Like everyone else has abandoned me. I'm the only one who's actually being faithful to you, and now they're trying to kill me too. So he feels alone, he feels abandoned, he feels like no one can understand him. So the Lord says, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. After the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" So we see here that there is a sequence of events that's happening, right? There's a fire, there's an earthquake, there's a wind, there's all these great big, monumental events that are occurring. But it says that God's not in those things. Now, mind you, what did Elijah just witness? A very powerful and dynamic display of God's power, right? Fire raining down from heaven, consuming the offering, and all the water that was around it as well. So he just witnessed the great power of God. And so God was trying to communicate to him that it's not only in the great power that I reveal myself. And it goes on to say that there's a gentle whisper that he hears. And it was God that was in that whisper. Sometimes we wait on God to show up in these big, magnificent ways in order to deliver us. But God is saying, that's not the only way that I present myself. It's not the only way I can manifest my power. Sometimes it can be in the sound of a gentle whisper. Now think about it. If someone is whispering to you, what does that mean? Right, there's a closeness there, right? You actually have to listen intently. There's a level of intimacy there as well. If someone's being that close to you, I hope that you're close to them, right? So there's a level of intimacy and relationship there, right? God was trying to emphasize not just his power, but also the relational aspect of his being. And that's where God was seeking to console Elijah, right? I am with you intimately. But then he goes on to ask the same question. Elijah, what are you doing here? And Elijah says the exact same thing. I've been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty, The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. So apparently, what God just did wasn't enough for Elijah, because he's still feeling the exact same way and gave God the exact same answer to the exact same question. So now what does God do? The Lord said to him, "Go back the way that you came, and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael, king of Aram. Also, anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel, and anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, from Abel-Maholah, to succeed you as a prophet. Jehu will put to death any who escape the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death any who escape the sword of Jehu. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal, and whose mouths have not kissed him." So, as we just discussed, one of the main concerns, one of the main reasons why Elijah was depressed and almost suicidal was because he felt alone. And so, what God tells him here is that, one, you are not alone because I am with you. And then two, he says, you are not alone because there are 7,000 other people who, just like you, have not forsaken me and have not bowed their knees to Baal. So in this moment, God reminds Elijah, you are not alone. I am with you. There are others like you as well. You are not abandoned. You are not discarded. You are not forsaken. You are not alone. All right, one more just for good measure. Let's look at Jeremiah 20, verse 7 through 18. You deceived me, Lord. I was deceived. You overpowered me and prevailed. I'm ridiculed all day long. Everyone mocks me. Whenever I speak, I cry out proclaiming violence and destruction. So the word of the Lord has brought me insult and reproach all day long. But if I say I will not mention his word or speak any more in his name, his word in my heart is like a fire shut up in my bones. I'm weary of holding it in. Indeed, I cannot. I hear my whispering, terror on every side. Denounce him. Let's denounce him. All my friends are waiting for me to slip, saying, perhaps you'll be deceived, and then we'll prevail over him and take our revenge on him. But the Lord is with me like a mighty warrior, so my persecutors will stumble and not prevail. They will fail and be thoroughly disgraced. Their dishonor will never be forgotten. Lord Almighty, you have examined the righteous and probed the heart and mind. Let me see your vengeance on them, for to you I have committed my cause. Sing to the Lord, give praise to the Lord. He rescues the life of the needy from the hands of the wicked. Cursed be the day that I was born. May the day my mother bore me not be blessed. Cursed be the man who brought my father the news, who made him very glad, saying, a child is born to you, a son. May the man be like the towns the Lord overthrew without pity. May he hear wailing in the morning, a battle cry at noon, for he did not kill me in the womb, with my mother as the grave, her womb enlarged forever. Why did I ever come out of the womb to see trouble and sorrow, and to the end of days in shame? This is pretty heavy stuff, right? Jeremiah is not only talking about how he's been mocked and afflicted, but he also ends up saying, I wish I was never born. I wish I was killed in the womb. That's some deep level of grief and sorrow and depression. But what's interesting about this chapter is that we actually see what's called a chiastic structure. So let me try to pull it up here. So in the chiastic structure, what essentially is happening is we have two thoughts or two ideas or two concepts that parallel one another, right? And then in the center of that, we have the actual main point or main idea that's being emphasized and concluded. And so we see in the first section, Jeremiah is talking about how he's enduring mocking, enduring all the afflictions. He's talking about all things that he's gone through, all his sorrow, all his pain and suffering. And then in the end, he goes on to talk about how he laments that he was even born and that he wished that he was killed in the womb and all these other afflictions. But in the middle, the actual main point, the actual center of this text, we see that he praises God. He remembers the Lord is with him, and he gives glory and praise to him. This seems to be the common thread that we see in all these different examples. How do we respond when we're under affliction? How do we respond when we are grieving, when we're under distress, when we're under all sorts of sorrow and pain and suffering? How do we respond? And we see this constant theme of remembering that the Lord is with you and giving praise to him. So, what is our takeaway? There are several places in the Bible where we're not going to read the verses. I know we've read a lot of verses already, but there's several places in the Bible that talk about, setting up stones or altars in different places, right? And the purpose of these altars was so that whenever anyone would see the structure, they'll be like, hey, what's this all about? Why is this here? And it'll be an opportunity for people to say, oh, well, this is here because God did A, B, C, right? And he was my protector, he was my provider, he was the one who saved me, and this is meant to be a reminder of that reality. So that every time I see it, I can remember the goodness of God. I can remember the character of God. I can remember what he's done for me. I can remember who he is. So that the next time I'm in a period of distress or anxiety or mourning or sorrow, I can remember what God has done in the past and what he's very much capable of doing in the future for me as well. And so I just listed here just some different ways that we can remember God's attributes and what he's done in the past. So we can do journaling. You can literally just kind of remember and write down all the things that God has done, all the ways that God's been faithful, all the ways that you've experienced his love, his mercy, his grace, writing them down so that in those moments you have something you can reflect on and reread from your own experience of God. You can do a scrapbook, right? You can take pictures and write down little captions for each picture. Like if you've gone through, maybe you're at the hospital one time, you can take a picture of yourself in the hospital, write down what you're going through and how God helped you heal and get better. You can kind of take pictures of all these different experiences that you may have had and save it in a scrapbook so that you can look back on and say, oh man, 10 years ago, I was here. 5 years ago, I was here, and now I am here. And a good visual representation of your life's progress. Right? Maybe you can do a vlog, right? If you're someone who's into making videos or content creation, you can make a vlog about your life, talking about the things that God has done, how you've seen him work in your life and the lives of those around you, in your community, and that can be as a reminder to yourself, but also to anyone else who may view it as well. Okay, maybe you can do voice notes, right? Maybe you don't like to write, because that's too long, but you like to talk. So you can literally just record yourself talking, and you can talk about the things that you've experienced, the way that God has helped you, the way that God's shown himself to you, so that later on you can remind yourself of it by listening to it again. Maybe you can do art, right? We are in an art house, so if you want to create something, maybe pottery, maybe it's a painting, maybe it's some other creative endeavor that you can embark on to be another physical reminder of what God has done for you. So every time you see that sculpture, every time you see that painting, every time you see that work of art, you can be reminded of, oh yeah, this is what God did for me. This is the faithfulness of God. This is the mercy of God. This is the love of God at work in my life. Maybe it's through music, right? If you're someone who is a musician yourself, you can maybe write your own songs or write your own pieces that can be reminders to yourself of what God has done for you. And you can write lyrics about your own life and your own struggles and your own overcomings. Or maybe if you're not so much musically inclined, you can create a playlist of songs that resonate with your life and your experience as well, that you can listen to during those times of distress or mourning. Then also, you can do rituals or traditions, right? We won't read these verses either, but in Exodus and in Deuteronomy, we see a whole list of different ceremonies and rituals and traditions that the Israelites did. And the whole purpose of these was to remind them of the salvation plan, the work of God, right? So whether it was the Passover, whether it was bringing into the sanctuary all the offerings, whether it was the Day of Atonement, right? All these different rituals, all these different traditions that they had were meant to ultimately remind them of the goodness of God, the grace of God, what he is doing and what he's going to continue to do for them. So maybe you can create your own tradition. Maybe every month you can fast for a week. Or maybe every week you can have a day where you have a service day, where you go out into the community and serve others. You can create your own tradition that can remind you of, this is how God works in my life. And I can want to extend that to others as well. But essentially, what we want to do is we want to intentionally do something that can remind us of who God is and what he's done for us. Because that is one of the key ways that we'll be able to combat the thoughts of distress, the thoughts of grief, the thoughts of depression, all these things that can make us feel helpless and hopeless. When we're reminded that God is by our side, that God is alive and well and working in our lives, it can help overcome that sense of helplessness and hopelessness and depression that you may be experiencing. So, this is my challenge and prayer for us today. So my challenge for you is to create a concrete and tangible when I remember opportunity for yourself. Right, you can use the examples I provided. You can create your own example, but just create something that you will be able to experience, see, hear, touch, whatever, something that you can tangibly experience every day to have opportunity to remember who God is and what he's done for you. And then secondly, what I want us to do right now is I want us to pray together. And in groups of 2 or 3, I want us to share a when I remember moment. Right? A time where God came through for you, a time where you experienced the love and faithfulness and mercy of God in your own life that brought you back from a place of despair. And then I also want you to possibly share a current affliction that you're going through. And then I want you guys to pray together, giving over your afflictions to God, praising him for who he is, what he's done in the past, and what he will do in the coming future as well. So we'll take a few moments to get together and pray, and then once everyone is complete, I'll then have a final prayer at the end. yeah, so hopefully everyone was able to have just a good time of reflection on who God is and what he's done, on your own afflictions and surrender them over to God, and creating that when I remember opportunity for yourself. Let's go ahead and close with prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you for who you are. We thank you that you are a God of love, of mercy, of faithfulness, and that those attributes, those characteristics never end. They can never be consumed, they can never be exhausted, and that we can always go to you for all that we may need. So in our moments of distress, in our moments of sorrow or sadness, in our moments of lamenting or mourning or grief, in our moments where we feel as if we are weak, I pray, Lord, that we will all remember who you are in those moments. Remember what you've done for us in the past in those moments, and remember that you are fully capable of helping us in the present and into the future as well. May we surrender all to you and remember that you truly are the great God of faithfulness. We love you and pray in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.